In this video, we are going to learn how we can use nouns as objects in English sentences. Before we start, let's review. What are nouns and what jobs do nouns have? Nouns are people, places, things, ideas, and animals. Nouns can have different jobs in a sentence. Sometimes nouns are subjects. Sometimes nouns are direct objects, indirect objects, or objects of prepositions. In this video, we're going to look at these 4 different jobs. Nouns as subjects. Remember, subjects are who or what the sentence is about. We can find subjects of sentences by asking, what or who is this sentence about? Typically, subjects are at the beginning of the sentence, but not always. So let's view some examples together. Laney College is in Oakland. What or who is the sentence about? Laney College is the subject. Number 2. There are 3 small children in my apartment. Who or what is this sentence about? Children. Children is the subject. Mike, his wife, and his 2 boys are on vacation this week. Who or what is the sentence about? Mike, his wife, and his 2 boys. In this sentence, we have 3 subjects. Sentence number 4. I am taking 4 English classes this semester. Who or what is this sentence about? I is the subject. And the last sentence, dinner was delicious. Who or what is the sentence about? Dinner, that's right. So here are all of the subjects highlighted in the sentences. So in these examples, the nouns, these nouns are acting like the subject. The job is to be the subject of the sentence. To write good English sentences, always start with the subject first. Think about who or what you want to write about and start by putting the subject at the beginning of the sentence. Now that we've finished reviewing how to use nouns as subjects, now it's time to learn how to use nouns as objects. Before we start, it's important that you know there are 3 different types of objects in English sentences. Let's learn how they are different. The first one is called a direct object. Direct object. The direct object receives the action from the verb. So it receives the action from the verb. The direct object comes after a transitive verb. We will learn more about transitive verbs soon. And you can find the direct object if you ask the subject, then the verb, and then ask what. So let's take a look at some examples. Look at this sentence. Emily cooked. Emily cooked. This sentence does not have a direct object because, remember, the action, the cooking action, is not received by anything. There's nothing after the verb. So this sentence structure is only subject and verb. Now let's look at the same sentence, but now with a direct object. Pasta is the direct object in this sentence. It is what was cooked. So remember, we want to ask the question, what did Emily cook? What did Emily cook? She cooked pasta. Pasta is the direct object. Pasta is what was cooked. So in this sentence, we see the subject, we see the verb, and we see the direct object. Pause here to study the second sentence. So now that we understand that direct objects come after the verb and direct objects receive the action of the verb, now let's practice. Find the direct object of the sentence in these 10 sentences here. Let's do 1 or 2 of them together. Let's read number 1. Karen cooks Vietnamese food on Wednesdays. Remember, to find the direct object, you want to ask, what did Karen cook? What did Karen cook? The answer is she cooked Vietnamese food. Vietnamese food is the direct object of this sentence. Let's look at number 2. Frank cleaned his apartment last week. What did Frank do? What did Frank clean? The answer is his apartment. His apartment. What did Frank clean? His apartment. His apartment is the direct object of this sentence. Please pause the video here to finish this practice activity. Please find the direct object in sentence numbers 3 through 10. Now let's check the answers. Here, all of the direct objects are highlighted. Remember to pause the video here and check your work. Circle any wrong mistakes so that you can learn from them. The second job that nouns can have as objects is what we call the indirect object. The first one we learned was the direct object. Now this one is the indirect object. Indirect objects are also nouns, but these nouns receive the direct object, not the verb action. They receive the direct object. Indirect objects come after the verb, but before a direct object. So this is important. Indirect objects come before a direct object, after a transitive verb. Let's look at some examples. Greg cooked Mary dinner. Okay, so let's remember nouns. We have different nouns in this sentence. Greg is a noun. Greg is the subject of the sentence. Cooked is the verb of the sentence. So what did Greg cook? What did Greg cook? He cooked dinner. Dinner is the direct object. Now, who received the dinner? Who received the dinner? Mary received the dinner. So Mary is the indirect object because she received the direct object, dinner. Let's look at the second example. Fernie asked Carlos a question. Fernie is the subject. Asked is the verb. Carlos, let's find out. What is Carlos? Carlos is the indirect object because it comes after the verb and before the direct object. So, what did Fernie ask? The direct object is a question. Fernie asked a question. Who received the question? Who received the question? The indirect object, Carlos. Now, let's practice. Find the indirect object of the sentence. Remember, not the direct object, but the indirect object. The indirect object receives the direct object. Pause the video here to read these 10 sentences carefully and find the indirect object. Here are the answers. The indirect objects are in the red color, and the direct objects are in this yellow color. Pause the video here to check your answers. Remember to circle any mistakes so that you know what to study later. The third job that nouns can have as objects is what we call the object of a preposition. Objects of prepositions, objects are still nouns. They come after a preposition. If you don't know what a preposition is, don't worry, we will learn this later. But prepositions are short words like in, at, for, to, after, before. These objects, these nouns, give information about time or place. So they answer the question of when or where. Let's look at some examples. Look at the sentence, Dad cooked pasta in the morning. Here, Dad is the subject, cooked is the verb, pasta is the direct object, and here we see in. In is the preposition. So morning is the object of the preposition. The second sentence, Mr. James planted trees in the garden. Again, in this sentence, we have 3 nouns. Mr. James is the subject, Trees is the direct object, and garden is the object of the preposition because we see the preposition in here. Okay, in this side, this is answering when in the morning. And here on the right, we can answer the question where. Where did Mr. James plant the trees? In the garden. In the garden is this preposition. We see the preposition in, and then after we see garden, an object of the preposition. Okay, so now let's do practice number 3. Here, we are going to learn that we can change a sentence that has an indirect object, and we can change it so that it's not an indirect object anymore, but it changes to be an object of a preposition. Look at sentence number 1. Lisa made Sally Vietnamese food last week. So here we see Sally is an indirect object. Sally receives the direct object, the food. Instead of putting Sally in the middle after the verb before the direct object, you can use a preposition if you want. For example, like this. Lisa made the food, direct object, for Sally. For is a preposition and Sally is the object after the preposition. So this way is using an indirect object. This way is using an object of a preposition, but it's the same information. It's just a different style of writing. They're both correct. Now let's look at number 2. My father asked Vicky a question last night. My father, subject, asked is the verb, asked a question is the object. Who received the question? Vicky. Vicky is the indirect object. Remember, I can change this from an indirect object, and I can use it as an object of a preposition if I use a preposition like this of. My father asked a question of Vicky last night. So I want you to try changing the sentence and use an object of a preposition. I'm giving you the preposition that you need to use. Pause the video and change these 3 sentences to use objects of prepositions. Here are the answers for number 3, number 4, and number 5. Pause the video and check your work. So we finished with sentences 3, 4, and 5. Now it's time to do sentences 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Again, you want to change the sentences from using an indirect object, change it to use an object of a preposition. Pause the video here to do this practice activity. Okay, here are the answers. Pause the video again to check your work. Okay, so in this video, we learned that objects are nouns and nouns can have different jobs in sentences. They can be subjects, direct objects, indirect objects, or objects of prepositions. Here, I am repeating this most important information again, so if you need to review, pause the video here and study the information on this page. Thank you for watching.